Welcome back, everyone, to Stories That Shouldn't Be Told. In today's episode, I'm sharing a chilling hospital horror, the story of a radiology room where the dead refuse to stay silent. Every scan reveals more than bones and lungs. Some images should never be taken, but before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who loves a good scare. And tell me in the comments, what are your favorite types of horror stories? Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let's begin. I'm a 23-year-old radiology technician working the graveyard shift at a rural hospital in eastern Tennessee. My shift runs from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and most nights it's just me, a skeleton crew of nurses, and whatever emergency cases roll through the doors. Last Thursday started like any other night. I'd been pulling doubles all week because my coworker called in sick, so I was running on maybe 3 hours of sleep from the past 2 days. The coffee machine in the break room had been broken for a week, and I was surviving on energy drinks and pure stubborn determination. Around 2 a.m., I got called to do a chest x-ray on an elderly woman who'd come in with breathing problems. The radiology department is in the basement, separated from the main hospital by a long corridor that always gives me the creeps during night shifts. The other staff members call the radiology department the one-time department because, supposedly, no one ever works there twice. People either transfer out immediately or something happens that prevents them from returning. Everyone who works down here complains about the same thing. You constantly feel like someone is watching you from the corners of your vision. Other technicians have mentioned sudden temperature drops that make your breath visible for a few seconds, and how the silence down here feels heavy, almost suffocating. There's even an old maintenance worker named Frank who used to talk non-stop. But after working alone down here one night 3 years ago, he hasn't spoken a single word since. He still does his job perfectly, but something happened that night that left him completely mute. Even during the day shift, people avoid staying alone in the department for too long. Honestly, I'd always dismissed all this talk as just workplace superstition and overactive imaginations. I figured people were just psyching themselves out in a creepy basement environment. The fluorescent lights flicker intermittently, casting weird shadows on the pale green walls. As I was setting up the X-ray machine, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Heavy, deliberate steps that echoed off the concrete floors. I assumed it was maintenance or security making their rounds, so I didn't think much of it. But then the footsteps stopped right outside my door. I waited for someone to knock or enter, but nothing happened. Just complete silence. When I peered through the small window in the door, the hallway was empty. The fluorescent light directly outside my room was flickering more aggressively now, creating this strobe effect that made my eyes water. I finished the X-ray and sent my patient back upstairs. The digital images came through on my computer screen, and something immediately caught my attention. In the background of the chest X-ray, barely visible but definitely there, was what looked like a second figure standing behind the patient. A tall, thin silhouette that shouldn't have been possible given how I had positioned her for the scan. I stared at the image for several minutes, zooming in and adjusting the contrast. The more I looked, the clearer it became. There was definitely a human shape in the background, but it was translucent, like a double exposure. I'd been doing this job for 2 years and had never seen anything like it. I decided to retake the X-ray, thinking maybe there was some equipment malfunction or interference. I called the patient back down, repositioned her exactly as before, and took another shot. This time, I made absolutely sure the room was clear before activating the machine. The second image came through, and my blood ran cold. The same figure was there again, in exactly the same position, but this time it appeared to be facing the camera directly. I could make out what looked like hollow eye sockets and a gaping mouth, as if it was screaming silently through the digital image. I sat back in my chair, telling myself it had to be fatigue playing tricks on my eyes. Sleep deprivation can cause hallucinations, and I was definitely pushing my limits, but these were digital images on a computer screen. How could I be hallucinating something that was captured by the X-ray machine itself? I saved both images to review later and sent the official report upstairs, but I only included the patient's medical findings. I couldn't exactly tell the attending physician that there appeared to be a ghost in the X-ray. For the rest of my shift, I tried to stay busy with paperwork and equipment maintenance. Every little sound made me jump. The hum of the machines, the settling of the old building, the distant ping of elevator doors opening and closing floors above me. Around 5 a.m., I decided to review the images one more time before my shift ended. I pulled them up on the computer, but something had changed. The ghostly figure was still there, but now it appeared to be reaching toward the camera, its arm extended as if trying to touch the lens. In the second image, the figure seemed even closer, more defined. As I stared at the screen, I heard those same heavy footsteps in the hallway again. This time, they were accompanied by what sounded like labored breathing, as if someone was struggling to walk. The footsteps stopped outside my door, and I heard a soft tapping on the glass. I looked up from my computer screen toward the window, and there was a face pressed against the glass. An elderly man with sunken cheeks and cloudy eyes that seemed to be looking right through me. His mouth was moving as if he was trying to speak, but I couldn't hear anything. I blinked hard, shook my head, and looked again. The window was empty. When I looked back at my computer screen, both X-ray images had changed again. The ghostly figure was gone entirely, leaving only normal chest X-rays showing healthy lung tissue and bone structure. I checked the file properties and timestamps. They showed the images had been modified just moments before, but I hadn't touched anything. I printed copies of the current images and locked them in my desk drawer, along with detailed notes about what I had seen. When my replacement arrived at 7 a.m., I didn't mention anything about the night's events. 2 weeks later, I found out that an elderly man had died in that exact radiology room 3 years ago. He'd suffered a massive heart attack while waiting for a chest X-ray and couldn't be revived. The hospital staff told me his family still visits sometimes, leaving flowers by the basement entrance. When I dug deeper into the records, I discovered there had been several other deaths in that same radiology room over the years. Patients who'd gone into cardiac arrest or suffered sudden medical emergencies during routine procedures. The room seemed to have an unusually high incident rate compared to other areas of the hospital. But so many questions still haunt me about that room. What is it about that specific space that attracts death? Why do so many patients suffer fatal incidents during what should be routine procedures? And most disturbing of all, why do they seem unable to leave even after they've died? Sometimes I wonder if there's something in that room that traps souls, keeping them bound to the place where they took their last breath. What did those who worked in this room before me see that made them avoid it? What experiences drove Frank to complete silence? What experiences drove Frank to complete silence? What horrors have played out in that space that I'm only now beginning to understand? I transferred out of the radiology department the very next week. I couldn't bring myself to go back down to that basement, let alone work alone in that cursed room again. The administration was surprisingly understanding when I requested the transfer, almost as if they'd been expecting it. Now I understand why they call it the one-time department. I became just another statistic, another worker who couldn't handle whatever lurks in those basement corridors. I still work at the hospital, but on a different floor, far away from the radiology department. Sometimes I wonder about whoever replaced me down there. and whether they'll last longer than I did. That was X-ray of the dead. Some departments should stay abandoned. Some rooms should stay locked. And some images should never be developed. If you made it to the end, you were lucky. So, before you ever look at another scan alone, like this video, share it with someone who works nights, and subscribe because more true hospital horrors are waiting for you.